Hey y'all. So this reading is going to be a little bit different because I'm going to read chapter 9, chapter 10, and chapter 11 all in one video because 9 and 10 are super short, okay? Chapter 9, Letter to Georgia. Dear Bill and Danny and Steve and Tony and Doug, now that we've got email, you can get this letter about as fast as I can type it. You want the Malloy girls? You can have the Malloy girls, especially Caroline. You know what she did now? She fell in the river. And you know how we got in trouble? Trying to save her, which we did. That's how. It all started with the bottles. We each put a note in a bottle with our name and phone number on it and threw it in the river. Whichever one of us has a bottle that goes the farthest by April 30th gets to be king or queen for a day, and all the rest of us have to be servants. But Caroline and her sisters were down at the river, probably trying to fish our bottles out so they wouldn't go anywhere, and Caroline fell in. She was swept around the end of Island Avenue, so we ran to the other side with Beth and Eddie and made a human chain across the shallow part. And what do we get? Dad chews us out for being down at the river in the first place. I think I could be happy without any more excitement. I could be happy to be a little bit bored now and then. I think I'm very lucky not to have any sisters at all. What do you think? Wally and Jake and Josh and Peter. Chapter 10, Letter from Georgia. Dear Wally and Jake and Josh and Peter. Yeah, email rules. Except somebody emailed a love letter to a girl in my class and signed my name, and now she hates my guts. I don't want the Malloy girls. You can have them. I don't want any sisters or girlfriends either, but I would sure like a little more excitement in my life than we've got here in Georgia. I don't know if we're coming back or not. Mom and Dad keep saying things like, if we stay. I don't want to stay. I want to come back to West Virginia. I want to come back even if the Malloys stay and we have to live somewhere else. Bill and Danny and Steve and Tony and Doug. P.S. The next time Caroline falls in the river, just wave goodbye. Chapter 11, Contest. Caroline did not know why her father had to be so angry at her. They had all been down at the river after all. She just happened to be the one who'd fallen in. Didn't she get any points for not drowning? Didn't she get any points for grabbing onto a floating tree limb and using it to hold herself up? And after I told them, I don't know how many times, to stay away from the river when it's high, Mrs. Malloy had said over and over again. All they were going to do, they said, was have a bottle race. Caroline, what possessed you to get so close to the water? All Caroline could say under Eddie's stern gaze was that she had been trying to fish something out. She didn't say what. How could you tell your parents that you had made a deal with the Hadfords and were trying to cheat before they did? But all the girls, not just Caroline, were grounded for a week. Eddie was being punished because as the oldest, she had not stopped her younger sister from doing something dangerous, and Beth was being punished for going along with the others. School and baseball practice only, their father said. No bookstore, no playground, no drugstore, no library, and no friends invited to the house. At least they didn't say we couldn't talk to each other, said Caroline. Now that would have been unbearable. Oh, I don't know, Caroline, said Beth. I think I could enjoy a whole week of reading uninterrupted. Yeah, I can enjoy a week of Caroline-free week. Come to think of it, said Eddie. Caroline flounced off, knowing in her heart of hearts that if she weren't around, her sisters' lives would be half as interesting as they were. The Friday after her scene in the river, however, Caroline found that school had become a lot more interesting, for Miss Applebaum announced that the County Spelling Championship would take place at the end of the month, right there in the auditorium in Buckman Elementary. This is why we have been working so hard on our vocabulary, she said. This is why I've asked you to look for new words in the dictionary and include at least 5 new words in every book report you write. It's why I've asked you to use a new word each night at the dinner table. For the next week, I would like you to use a new word each time you ask a question in class. And if you can't see that word in your head, if you aren't sure how to spell it, then look it up and make sure. Caroline promptly raised her hand. Miss Applebaum, I surmise that our esteemed parents will be in close proximity when we congregate in the auditorium for our spelling bee. Wally turned and stared at Caroline with a look of disgust on his face, and some of the kids laughed, but Miss Applebaum was smiling. Very good, Caroline. Yes, the countywide spelling bee will be held on the last Saturday of April, and of course parents are invited. For the very laws of our land are written in sentences, and sentences are composed of words which must be spelled correctly if they are to mean anything at all. Do we have to take part in the spelling bee? Asked another girl. Let's try to use a new word in that sentence, Kimberly, Miss Applebaum said. Can you ask that question another way? Are you going to force us to be in the spelling contest? Kimberly wanted to know. Every class and every school in the county will have its own spelling bee next Monday, and yes, I expect you to take part. But only the top student in each class will be the finalist in the county-wide spelling bee. Caroline smiled smugly. She knew who number one would be. Her only possible rival might be Wally Hatford. He wasn't so good in math, and he was pretty horrible at music and art, but he could ace every spelling test that came along. She didn't know how he did it. At lunchtime, when Wally was putting his books away, Caroline leaned over his shoulder and said, "Isn't this exciting, Wally? Wouldn't it be great if one of us was the finalist for our room?" "No," said Wally. "Why not?" "Because it wouldn't." "Well, how come you're so good at spelling then, huh?" "I don't know," said Wally. Caroline ran after him and tugged at his sleeve. "Well then, if you really don't want to do it, why don't you miss a word on purpose and let me win the spelling bee for our class? Let me be the reigning spelling bee queen for Upshur County." Wally stopped in his tracks. He turned and stared at Caroline as though he had never seen her before, as though she were a little bug he was examining under a microscope. "Never!" he said, and wheeled back around again. Caroline sat down on a chair and took out her egg salad sandwich. She would be queen of something yet. She just had to be. "This is a weird school," Beth announced. "It's spring, and somehow all these contests and tournaments are coming up. It's as though no one can do anything unless it's a game." "What are you talking about?" asked their mom. "First, they've got baseball. You can't just divide up all the kids who want to play into two groups and let them play each other. You've got to have teams and play against each other." "What's wrong with that? That's what sports are all about. I think it's great." "Well, maybe a baseball is okay, but now there's going to be a spelling contest in each class, and after that, a county-wide spelling bee, and then I suppose there will even be a national contest." "I think it's rather nice," said Mrs. Malloy. "I think a spelling bee should be every bit as exciting as a baseball game." "But now they're doing it to books," Beth protested. "As soon as we got back from spring vacation, the principal promised that if the whole school read 1,000 books by the end of April, he'd spend the night on the school roof." Mr. Malloy laughed. "Why, that's a great idea. What better way to get kids learning and reading than for the principal to promise to do something ridiculous? Boy, will he be miserable. He'd better hope it doesn't rain." "Dad, listen to yourself. The principal will be doing something ridiculous and miserable if we will do something miserable and ridiculous first." "Yeah, Dad, read 1,000 books and make yourselves miserable? Is that what he's saying?" "You should read books because they're fun, because you enjoy them," said Caroline. "They've got you, George. The principal is sending the wrong message." "He shouldn't have to send any message at all," said Beth. "It's like telling us that he'll spend the night on the roof if we'll eat 1,000 hot fudge sundaes. It's something we want to do anyway. He doesn't have to bribe us." "You know, it's time like this that make me feel I've got the wisest daughters in the world, and it's things like the three of you playing too close to the river that make me think you were born without brains. So on balance, I'd say you're okay kids after all. But how does the principal know whether you really read a book or just said you did? We have to write the title on a chart, and the teacher asks us questions about the book to make sure we read it all the way through." The telephone rang, and Caroline answered. "Hello? Caroline, this is Wally." "Yes, Wally?" "Have you decided to let me be the spelling bee queen for my room?" "No, but I was wondering, do you itch anywhere?" "What?" "I mean, are any of you scratching a lot, and do you have a rash on your stomach?" "What?" "What's the matter?" asked Mother. "It's Wally Hatford. He wants to know if we itch." "What?" yelled Beth and Eddie together. "Does he think we have fleas or something?" "No, we don't itch," Caroline said. "Why do you want to know?" "Because if you do, you might have what Peter's got. Chicken pox. Have a nice day." And he hung up. Chapter 12 is Go Directly to Jail.